Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Xizhi. Coming up in this edition, the United States has increased its levies on Chinese goods while announcing a 90-day pause of its tariffs for other countries. Germany's two-party union bloc, led by Friedrich Merz, has secured a deal with the Social Democrats to form a coalition government. And relatives are mourning the victims of a fatal nightclub roof collapse in the Dominican Republic. More than 100 people died in the incident. We begin in North America. US President Donald Trump has announced a 90-day pause of his tariffs, excluding China. The White House says the 10% blanket duty on almost all US imports will remain in effect. In another escalation, the US increased its levies on goods imported from China to 125%. Jim Spellman reports from Washington, D.C.
Keeping that 10% base tariff that the president rolled out last week, but this 90-day pause. After that, stocks immediately rallied, making up a lot of their losses, still below where they were last week on so-called Liberation Day when President Trump rolled out this latest series of tariffs, and down for the year, but making up a lot of that loss. So President Trump says that now in this 90-day period, the U.S. will try to work out individual customized trade deals with all of these different countries, President Trump claiming that there are 75 perhaps countries that have approached the U.S. hoping to make a trade deal. Regarding China, President Trump said he does hope to speak with Chinese officials at some point, but when asked whether he expected more tariffs on Chinese goods to go into place, President Trump said, "I don't think we'll have to do it."
We can't imagine. I don't think I'll have to do it. I don't think we'll have to do it more. We calculated it very carefully.
He also said that he was open to perhaps some exemptions for certain industries. He said it's just instinctively, that's his process. And I think a lot of what you're seeing play out, some of the chaos that we're seeing, is really the global trading system versus President Trump's instincts.
That was Jim Spellman in Washington. In Beijing, a foreign ministry spokesperson says the country does not want to fight trade and tariff wars, but will not flinch when such a war comes. Lin Jian made the remarks after the US President Donald Trump threatened to impose more tariffs on imported Chinese products.
There are no winners in tariff or trade wars. The Chinese side does not want to be involved in a trade war, but we are not afraid of fighting one either. We will not sit and watch the legitimate rights and interests of the Chinese people deprived, or the international economic and trade rules, as well as the multilateral trading system destroyed. If the U.S. insists on bringing tariff and trade wars, China will fight to the end. The U.S. is prioritizing its own interests over the interests of the international community, sacrificing the legitimate interests of other countries to serve its hegemonic end. That will inevitably face stronger opposition from the international community.
Earlier, the Commerce Ministry reiterated that its doors are open for tariff negotiations, but Beijing will not back down from a fight. It said dialogue must take place under the principles of mutual respect and equality. The spokesperson said China hopes the U.S. will go along in the same direction. The ministry also said China will focus on managing its domestic affairs and counter uncertainty in the external environment with stability at home. It pledged to help foreign trade companies expand markets and make full use of its consumer goods trading program. The spokesperson said China's foreign trade is confident and capable of all challenges. Staying in China, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is paying a visit on Thursday and Friday. China says it hopes to take this opportunity to deepen strategic mutual trust and expand opening up. Yu Yang reports.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's trip will last from Thursday to Friday, and this actually marks his third trip to China within 3 years. And according to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, during his stay, Chinese President Xi Jinping will meet with him and Premier Li Qiang will hold talks with him. Well, actually, one of the major highlights of Sanchez's trip to China is that he comes just amid the trade chaos caused by the Trump administration's global tariff war. Well, if we take a look at some of the expectations for this trip from global media outlets, we may find that some media reports say that, quote, Spain is pushing for the European Union pivot to China to counter Trump's tariffs. At the same time, adding that this visit will offer a chance to swap notes on a common problem, how to respond to an increasingly unreliable U.S. And let's also mention that on Wednesday, all but one of the 27 EU members voted to impose new tariffs on U.S. goods in response to Washington's tariffs on EU steel and aluminum. In fact, ahead of the trip to China, Sanchez also made a visit to Vietnam, where he said on Wednesday that, quote, a trade war is in no one's interest. Nobody wins with a trade war, and every country loses, especially workers and the middle classes. And last year, Sanchez also criticized the EU's tariffs on Chinese military vehicles. Well, data released by the Chinese customers shows that last year, the bilateral trade volume between China and Spain hit over 356 billion yuan, or over 44 billion euros, a year-on-year increase of 4.5%. And China's foreign ministry earlier said Spain is an important cooperative partner for China within the EU, and the bilateral relations are at forefront of China's ties with the European nations.
That was Yu Yang on China and Spain strengthening ties as the Spanish Prime Minister visits China. Turning to Europe, Germany's two-party union bloc led by Friedrich Merz has secured a deal with the Social Democrats to form a coalition government. Merz won the election in February but fell short of a majority. The new alliance aims to tackle issues such as immigration and defense spending. The deal excludes the far-right AfD party, which has topped opinion polls for the first time. Natalie Carney has more from Munich.
Germany looks like it's going to be run by another grand coalition. We had 4 weeks of negotiations, 45 days since the CDU, Conservative Party, as well as the CSU here in Bavaria, won snap elections in Germany. There's been a lot of pressure on them since to form a government. Of course, these tariffs from the U.S. as well as European security. Brussels, the entire union, want to see a firm, decisive, strong government in the union's biggest economy. What we do know is that in that coalition deal, there are some subject lines about tax-free overtime as well. Tax on electricity will be reduced. They will be scrapping supply chain regulations, and as well a very controversial subject here in Germany, immigration. And there's going to be a change to the immigration and asylum policies, to which Friedrich Merz did say that this new coalition deal gave a clear signal that there will be a new course on migration policy. Friedrich Merz has also said that he's going to make this new government more bureaucratically effective. Now, as far as the next government is concerned, the CDU will hold the foreign ministry, the interior ministry, as well as agriculture and education, while the SPD will be monitoring finance, defense ministries, the environment, as well as building and housing. Now, what is next is basically these parties need to agree on this deal. If this is all agreed upon, which is very likely, the parliament can then elect the CDU chairman Friedrich Merz as chancellor. That is likely to take place on May the 7th. One of his biggest challenges going forward, of course, is these tariffs from the U.S. He has previously said that he wants to readjust and rediscuss a free trade deal between the U.S. and the EU, and I'm certain that's going to be something that he makes a priority after the 7th of May.
That was Natalie Carney on what's next in Germany's leadership. In South America, the International Monetary Fund has reached a preliminary agreement with Argentina to lend the country $20 billion. The much-needed rescue package comes as President Javier Milei faces mounting pressure over the country's economy. Joe Richards has more from Buenos Aires.
Amid global economic turmoil, Argentina's President Javier Milei has received a welcome boost. The International Monetary Fund announced it has reached an initial agreement with Argentina for a $20 billion four-year loan to support the South American country's economic program. Despite Libertarian President Milei's efforts to reduce the fiscal deficit and slash public spending, cash-strapped Argentina still faces numerous monetary challenges. Annual inflation is running at over 66%. Strict currency controls are in place. There's an ongoing debate over whether the local currency, the peso, is overvalued, and central bank reserves are falling. The country also faces significant debt repayments in the coming months. Argentina is already the IMF's main debtor after receiving the largest ever credit line, $50 billion, from the financial agency in 2018. The key details of this new agreement remain uncertain. Specifically, how much money will Argentina receive up front and what conditions are attached to the loan? One central question is whether the loan demands potentially lead to a devaluation of the peso. Argentina's government says it expects the deal to be approved when the IMF Executive Board meets on Friday.
That was Jill Richards reporting from Buenos Aires. Staying in the Americas, relatives are mourning the victims of a nightclub roof collapse in the Dominican Republic that has killed more than 100 people. Authorities are scrambling to identify the bodies after the incident at a famous club in Santo Domingo. Nitsa Soledad Paris has more.
The Dominican Republic is observing 3 days of national mourning. A night of celebration turned deadly when the roof collapsed during a live concert at one of Santo Domingo's most popular nightclubs. Rescue teams have worked tirelessly around the clock, coming through twisted metal and concrete in a desperate search for survivors. On Wednesday, emergency officials warned that time is running out.
We still have at least 24 to 36 more hours of work ahead of us. That doesn't mean we aren't thoroughly searching the area. We are doing it. We are intervening in targeted sections and in the places where we can operate without risking possible remaining life.
Heavy machinery now assists in the painstaking operation, while grief-stricken families gather nearby, anxiously reviewing hospital lists and awaiting news of their loved ones.
They've removed many bodies from there, and the last one they removed was wrapped in a body bag. Kind of fitting for someone of his height and thinness, but I didn't want to go. I don't have the stomach to find out the worst yet.
The collapse has claimed the lives of several prominent figures, including merengue star Ruby Perez, who was performing when disaster struck, former Major League Baseball players Octavio Dotel and Tony Blanco, renowned fashion designer Martín Polanco, and Montecristi province governor Nelcy Cruz. International aid has arrived, with specialized rescue teams from Mexico, Israel, and Puerto Rico now joining local efforts in the race against time.
That was Nitsa Soledad Paris on the nightclub tragedy in the Dominican Republic. Finally, in Africa, the Sudanese armed forces is making fresh advances against the Rapid Support Forces. Media reports citing military sources say the army has entered Ombada locality west of Durban, which was previously held by the RSF. The RSF has intensified drone attacks on the northern Sudanese state bordering Egypt. Naba Muhyiddin has more on the Sudanese army's offensive.
Since the military regained the control of Khartoum, there is many military gains on ground. The military is surrounding west of Omdurman, which is one of the strongest strongholds and last strongholds for RSF, and it's a place where RSF is using it to have military boosts and military troops from Western Sudan to Khartoum. So the military right is surrounding west of Omdurman, and also controlled one of the main police camps that was controlled by the RSF over a year ago. The military also regained control of one of the main villages in Blue Nile region. So there is many military gains, but also the threats are so big amid regular drone attacks by the RSF on the infrastructure, including power infrastructure, and also attacking the northern state. 6 people were killed in their house, including 2 children, because of the drone attacks used by the RSF in a bid to enter the northern state. So there are many military gains in the capital Khartoum, and also the military is surrounding west of Omdurman and regain control on one of the villages in Blue Nile, but the threats are so big, and there is also threats of war expansion into the northern state. It's too early to expect any return of the ministries or ministers to Khartoum. According to the Sudanese government, they said Khartoum, we are expecting that Khartoum and some ministries will go will go back to the capital within few months. The big challenge right now is the power itself. RSF has sabotaged most of the power plants in the capital Khartoum and the power infrastructure. So even people who return to the capital are suffering from the power shortage and water shortage. But also there is some governmental institutions are expected to return very soon, including the headquarters of tariffs and also the police forces. There is 31 police stations are operating in the capital, and we are expecting that the government will work on the return of main ministers, but not less than few months. The Ministry of Information also announced that the Khartoum airport will be operating within 6 months. So if that happens at Tinina, we are expecting that many ministries will, of course, return to the capital. But after tackling the issue of the security and power plants and also securing the capital from any attack by the RSF, ground attacks, not drone attacks, of course.
That was Naba Muheddin in Port Sudan. Now, recapping the headlines before we go, the United States has increased its levies on Chinese goods while announcing a 90-day pause of its tariffs for other countries. Germany's two-party union bloc, led by Friedrich Merz, has secured a deal with the Social Democrats to form a coalition government. And relatives are mourning the victims of a fatal nightclub roof collapse in the Dominican Republic. Over 100 people have died in the incident. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Xi Zhi. Thank you for listening.